Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Talk on Socialist Telly. It's been quite a big day in the city of Liverpool today with 8 councillors, former Labour councillors now, who have grouped together to form what I've just learned is called Liverpool Community Independence Group on the City Council, which is not very far away from being the official opposition on the council. And certainly in terms of resisting cuts that the mayor and council leadership are wanting to put through on behalf of the Tories, then pretty much what opposition there is. So I'm delighted to welcome. Well, we've got my colleague Damo from Socialist Telly here with me, and going from left to right, we've got councillors. Left to right, I'm looking at least Sam Gorst, Alan Gibbons, Alfie Hinks, and the estimable Anna Rothery, former Lord Mayor of the city as well, who are all part of the new LCI group, along with 4 other colleagues. So good evening, everybody. Hopefully we're going to manage everybody all coming in through there on one camera and one mic. Let's jump straight in, and obviously as we get comments in from people through the show, we can field those as well. Reasons for leaving. Give us who's going to give us a rundown onto how has LCI come to be, and what led up to it. That what did the Labour Party do as well that you were all part of and now aren't?
Shall I start off with that? I mean, basically, we couldn't accept the cuts budget from the City Council at the same time that we had a rise of 10 million to 30.7 million pounds of reserves. We were going to be doing massive cuts in adult social care. We were going to be making 4 non-council run libraries more insecure, and we were going to impose a green bins charge, which is environmentally unsatisfactory, probably won't raise the money, and is wrong in principle to be charging the poor when they already basically pay their council charge. We asked the Labour Party, because we were being left in mid-air for a month, and they'd admitted they were late giving us a response, what they were going to do about this situation, where we had broken the whip and voted against the budget. We gave them an ultimatum, tell us by April the 19th what you intend to do. We got no reply, and so we have resigned the Labour whip collectively, and we're establishing a group, which you've already named.
Anybody else want to come in on that?
Just to highlight, obviously, what Alan said, and the important principles and what we resigned on. But people need to know that there was an alternative. We haven't just done this just because to cause havoc. We had an alternative levelling up paper. That's what Starmer says. Let's fight the Tories. Let's get them levelling up. Where's the levelling up paper? Well, we had a levelling up paper for the Labour group, and that had the practice of best practice, best value, and that meant that spending some of the assets that people say that we're selling the crown jewels. Well, the crown jewels in our city are St George's Hall, the India buildings, the Cunard buildings, and all the other historic properties that Liverpool own. They are crown jewels. To say that Everton Football Club training ground is a crown jewel is wrong. To say that that some of the Liverpool airport, the crown jewels, that's not. That was bought on the process that we could sell it on to protect the services of the city, and they failed to do that. And it got to be pointed out that the level of paper that we produced to them was just kicked in the long grass, and it's sad that it's come to this. So I just need to make it clear to people out there that we haven't done this just for devilment's sake. We've done this because there was an alternative. It was a legal alternative. It was a well thought out alternative, which included, by the way, 3 brand new sports centres to be put on into the failing sports centres that we've had for the past 35, 40 years. So I just wanted to make that point that there was the levelling up paper that we put forward and they rejected it.
Well, we saw some quite scurrilous attempts, it seemed to me, by certain right-wing councillors to pretend that there hadn't been an alternative, or that you could have just kind of gone along with the thing and tweaked things later on, or you could have moved a motion at the meeting to change it all and didn't do that, etc. So, Anna, do you want to give us a bit of a background as to, what was said, what the reality was, and what the, we've heard about the sports centres, but what else would there have been in the plan, and how would it have been funded? So, give us a bit of meat on the bone on that one.
Is that, let's be honest here. They've increased our reserves to £30 million. We don't need £30 million worth of reserves. Anybody else is happy with 20 million as reserves, for the size of our city. We're not the biggest city. Other cities have got 20 million reserves, and it's acceptable to have that. So that's a big issue. That 10 million could have gone towards, not making any cuts at all. But, as Alfie's already said, we had a really strong, and we knew that the consistent cuts year on year over the last 10 years, that, a day would come when we would say there's just no way that we're going to implement any cuts. And that day was this day. And so, we had reserves, we'd invested in terms of, John Lennon Airport, we had investments in Finch Farm, etc. And we could have used money there that we could have pulled dividends out of, we could have pulled shares out of, and we didn't have to implement any cuts at all. And so it is a political choice, the fact that these cuts were made, and against the advice of the people who have now formed this group, because we did put a cohesive alternative forward, and it should have been looked at. The response to say that it wasn't robust enough, I'm sorry, but it doesn't hold any water for me. There's no evidence that they've even looked in to see how robust or how unrobust it was. And so for me, this has been a political choice. And, this is there's a bit of a game play going on here. We've got Tories in the city. They've implemented cuts again. They've tried to destabilise the city and the party within it. And they've also tried to play, fast and loose with the constituents of our city. They didn't have to do that. And I'm so disappointed that a city that can rest on our laurels as being the fighters that we've been and we've proven consistently over many, many decades on many issues of inequality and unfairness, that we didn't take the stance that we needed to take.
I'm just going to cut in there with one piece of breaking news is, there are some people who might be watching the football tonight instead of watching Socialist Telly. You can watch Socialist Telly on catch-up, but Liverpool are up 1-0 already against Manchester United. So if you're a United fan, sorry about that. Liverpool fan, come on there, get in. And come on, the good Reds,
Oh, no, I'm a third-generation Man U supporter. Would you believe?
Oh dear.
I've got actually just on the subject of these reserves. Cutting services that are needed for the sake of having reserves is pretty bad enough as it is. But obviously, we've got this cost of living crisis now that everybody's starting to feel bite. And if we're all having to try and struggle to live within our means these days, and we're finding it more and more difficult to do that, and people are frankly not being able to do that, should the council be cutting stuff for the sake of a nest egg, essentially? What kind of message is that sending out to people that are struggling and watching their services collapse around them, that the council just wants money for a rainy day, essentially?
Well, precisely. I mean, we shouldn't be implementing the cuts. And also, I've spoken to you guys about the issue before. We've also ring-fenced £4 million for the commissioners in the city to do a best value exercise. For me, that's tragic. At a time when we've got families struggling, we've got children going to school hungry, we've got mothers choosing between heating and eating, we're actually ring-fencing £4 million to do a best value exercise. That has to be challenged.
Yeah, it should be challenged. I mean, this is a Tory thing that's being handed down. This cost of living crisis has been manufactured by the Tories. Surely a Labour council in a staunch Labour city should be challenging that and not enabling it, frankly. I mean, where is the sense in this?
No, definitely. I think for me, there's a lot of larger councils out there with more residents who haven't implemented these, large amounts of reserves. I think it's shocking considering, this council now has reduced adult social care budgets, has implemented a green bin tax. I think it's absolutely shocking that they're pitching libraries against each other to bid for funding. The reserves, we needed them as residents. You know, our residents needed those reserves, and yet, you know, they've put them in a nest egg. You know, we need them now. We don't need them in a year's time when there's more destitution on you know, on the streets, and there's more poverty. The time's now.
Can I just highlight one thing just to sort of replicate what that means of £30 million for the most deprived city in the country. Let's not make no bones about that. We are the most deprived city in this country by the Tories. If you look at the core cities around the country, Bristol, Sheffield, Leeds, they have average reserves of £22 million. The most deprived city in the country, and now we've got £30 million. It's politics of a madhouse.
Yeah.
The phrase that summed it up for me, Ron Heron said at the Liverpool Council meeting, that we're saving for a rainy day when it's pouring down. And that is just shocking. I think the other point to make is looking forward, because during that debate, when we were being, I think, effectively fobbed off, continually cabinet members said, we can consider some of these investments next year. Now, it was never convincingly explained why we couldn't do it this year, but it does mean they've basically created a rod for their own back politically, because we intend to scrutinise and say we want to see this social development, we want to see the community investment, we need to see some of the things that were in this levelling up document, and we will hold them to account on that consistently.
Steve?
That, I mean, you said there, a couple of people mentioned, you know, kind of political madness, etc. But I mean, political seems to be the word on a lot of this stuff, because when, you know, I mean, the Liverpool's my home city now, and it's, you know, as far as I'm concerned, best city I could live in. But, you know, the place is used to having the Tories attack it. You know, that's been the case since at least the Thatcher years. But, you know, Labour seems to be attacking the city at the moment. And when these commissioners were first announced, Keir Starmer he didn't stick up for the city. He went straight on the TV, I think it was, and said, "Oh yeah, we welcome this. You know, this is great stuff." And he, you know, to my mind, he's declared war on the city for a while now, and this has been a big part of it. How much of this is political, that they're just allowing this stuff through and kind of, you know, ushering it through? At the same time, let's not forget, as giving the three commissioners a retrospective 50% pay rise, backdated to when they first started, which is costing God knows how many other millions of pounds that the city doesn't have. So, you know, I want to major on the positive stuff, and we'll talk about that shortly. But, you know, let's not pull any punches on this now, because nobody has to worry about what the Labour Party thinks on it anymore. What is the political landscape going on there, and why do we have a notionally left-wing mayor, etc., who are busy ushering through cuts that have been mandated by the Tories and welcomed by Keir Starmer?
I mean, let's be honest, Steve. I mean, you know, Liverpool, it's a Tory takeover, let's be honest. You know, we've had decades...
Sorry, Anna, shout up a little bit, because you're not coming through too well.
Sorry, we've had decades of managed decline in the city. You know, the city, in spite of the economic downturn nationally and globally, the city is faring quite well in terms of our visitor economy. We were doing extremely well. We were bucking the trend in terms of, we were still fighting, you know, we were still at our heads above water. But, you know, the city's become a lucrative opportunity for some of those Tories down in the south, in terms of investment in land. The Freeport is another big issue that they're just starting to get their hands onto. You know, there's all these things that are going on in Liverpool. You know, and unfortunately, everybody turned their back on this city. And it's the likes of our constituents, our community residents, our members, our elected members that are around us now, who stayed loyal to this city over decades and decades through the most difficult and turbulent times. And now that the city's potentially got everything that it needs to go forward, you know, we're now being hijacked by the Tories. And, you know, the Labour Party is literally opening the gate for them and opening it up and saying, come in and take what you want. And, you know, this is the reality. You know, for us as elected members, many of us have been Labour Party members for decades. I have since I was an 18-year-old girl, which is more years than I care to remember. But the reality is that we can't stand by and allow our city to be held ransom or held hostage by the commissioners and the Tories who want to carve up the assets in this city and look at what lucrative deals they can get their hands on. You know, what kinds of elected members would we be if we sat silently by and allowed this to happen?
And look at the impact electorally, if nothing else, because Albrecht is rock solid, and it's where I was elected, and we had a really good young candidate in Sam East, way better than the Lib Dem candidate. And look what happened, 48% swing, hung on to it by about 30 votes. And this is in Warbreck, one of the safest seats in one of the safest constituencies, the safest constituencies in Britain. And so it's not just that implementing the transmission belt of cuts on behalf of the Tories is wrong, it's also in their own terms damaging for this Liverpool Labour leadership. And I mean, when we've got, you know, some people re-recruited from the Tinge Party actually carrying out this sort of activity, it's appalling. I mean, why on earth did you have to go from all member meetings of CLPs to delegate-based meetings, making it easier to manipulate through societies and poorly attended union branches in many cases? Why did you have to do that when the Collar report was supposed to shine a searchlight on what was wrong in 3 departments of the council? And really, I think scrutiny has got to be one of the big messages for our group. There are things wrong in this city that have been accumulating as being wrong for a long time. It's been a year now, and the only thing the Collar report has managed to do is the Collar team has paid themselves 50%. Where on earth is the best value? Where's the accountability? Where are the results? The same could be said of the police investigations.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's worth mentioning because, I mean, the thing that triggered off the mayoral contest that you stood for, Anna, and then was stitched up out of by the Labour Party, was, you know, the arrest of the previous Joe Anderson, who was the mayor. We have another Joe Anderson, the female Joe Anderson this time. And he was arrested and there was all the furore, but he's never been charged with anything as far as I understand it. And that all just seems to have gone very dead. So, you know, it begs the question of how much, you know, political manoeuvring was involved in that just to try to bring about a regime change or whatever. You know, yeah, but it's been mentioned you know, it's worth probably recapping just a few of the things. So, Alan, you mentioned the disenfranchisement of the Labour members in the local area. We've seen, as you mentioned again, I think a woman who left the party in order to go and campaign for the, you know, racist associated funny tinge party, the Change UK party. And not the only one in that kind of position in the Labour Party by any means who did that and is now, you know, back in some kind of influence. But we've also seen, you know, the rigging of selections to keep out any left-wing candidates in the most left-wing city in England. And most scandalously of all, probably, we've seen Keir Starmer write for the rag that we don't like to name in this city. And not only that, but then say he would do it again and promote people on his front bench who have done the same. And yet he still dares to come here in September to have his conference in Liverpool, which to me is, you know, is perhaps unwise. Have I missed anything? I mean, what else has he been doing that...
Just a quick point, Steve, was what Alan said, just to highlight, and people who are listening, that, you know, the results that the last 2 by-elections that we had was a massive disaster for the Labour Party in the city, and the amount of people that came out. And I think it's a clear indication now that the people of Liverpool are putting them on notice now. And it's as clear as day. We've got a by-election that will be coming up at some point in the very near future in Exactly. And that's going to be quite interesting in terms of how people are thinking. You know, it really is going to be sort of, you know, are we in the mix with that? And you know, what's going to conspire from that by-election? But I'm certainly convinced now that the people of this city, based on the results in Everton and Warbeck, that they've definitely put the Labour Party on notice.
I mean, I know it's been mentioned a number of times before previously that I know commentators on social media and so on and so forth will have mentioned that Liverpool could potentially become the next Scotland for for Labour in terms of losing it. In terms of what you've seen recently in those by-elections you just mentioned, how realistic a prospect do you think that could be?
Well, personally, I mean, I think particularly in the South End, there'll be an absolute meltdown if this green bins charge carries on, just as one example. And the North End, which people always think is red in tooth and claw, the recent result in Warbrek has shown, it's not impregnable. So I don't think there could be any complacency for the Labour Party. I think they need to change tack completely, and it needs to give an inspirational, message of how the city can be transformed. And we will be putting that sort of message and trying to hold the Labour Party to account. We still believe we have Labour socialist values. We'll stand on those values, and we'll examine the Labour Party's record on whether it too pursues those values. And there's plenty of good socialists still in the Labour Party, that believe in those values. And so, we will be friends to those people.
I think, Steve, for me, being a South Liverpool councillor, if you like, I think the most worrying thing for me about the green bin charge is that it disproportionately affects the residents within my ward. We've got a lot of social housing residents on 3 and 4 bedroom housing with massive gardens. Now, they can't afford to live at the minute anyway. So adding this extra charge, they're going to really suffer a huge blow. And I know the Cabinet are saying that they're going to put some safeguards in place, but they haven't actually told us what those safeguards are. And I don't want my residents begging for money and ringing hotlines at the council asking for, a lift up. I want them to have their own dignity, and this Cabinet hasn't thought about that in one bit.
Yeah, and I mean the other solutions they put forward were things like drive your green waste to the tip and stuff, but or compost as well.
Economy, Steve. Any good housekeeper who knows how to budget their allowance knows that this is a false economy. It's going to end up costing the city so much more in the long run, not just financially, but in terms of the hardship that's going to create for the houses that Sam's referring to. Princess Park, my ward, there's a lot of council houses that was built predominantly to give people outdoor space, green spaces for children to play, etc. And there's some of the poorest members of our community that live in those houses. They cannot afford to pay that £40 supplement for the green bin.
And don't necessarily have a car to be able to drive to the tip, or if they do, then it's causing more pollution than the price of fuel is.
Exactly. So, I mean, it flies in the face of the green environment, the changes that we need to make. It just flies in the face of that. It does not make any sense whatsoever to me. I think in the long run, it's going to cost more in terms of finances, but I think in terms of social, housing and the hardship it's going to create there, it's just going to be a non-starter. I mean, the kickback has been, huge in Liverpool.
And for me, I don't think that's the biggest issue either. The biggest issue that they've kind of covered up is the adult social care issue. That's more pressing and concerning for me, because the right-wing press within Merseyside haven't even picked it up. And it shows just the relationship they've got with, the Cabinet at the moment. It's just shocking.
Yes. Well, I think at all levels in the local press there's been a lot of apologism on behalf of the behaviour of the council that really shouldn't be going on. They should be examining and scrutinising what they're getting up to, not making excuses for them. We've got a question in here from Paul McCord, who's asking, do the LCI members plan to encourage other socialist independent candidates to stand in local elections? And also, are they willing to work and support other socialist parties? So I guess that's kind of, we're starting to move on to the, the kind of positive side of what you're going to get up to now as a new group on the council. What's going to be the approach on other electoral areas where you're not standing yourselves, or, where there are other parties maybe looking to put people up?
I think that's a discussion to be made if any socialist parties are standing. But for us as a group, we're more concerned now in getting the message out, is to get the positivities of all this. We're going through the negativities of what the council have done and what they've failed to do. And it's now down to us as a group to say, this is our manifesto moving forward. This is the 11-month paper. This is what we want to build on. And we take that opportunity now to get people. You've got thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the country, and certainly in Liverpool now, that have left the Labour Party and are waiting in the wings to be active again. And we welcome them. We welcome them people to come on board with us and to work with us. And indeed, any candidates, any socialists that that support our ethos and our policies of what we're bringing forward, is to come and join us. Come and join us, and stand as a candidate, because I'm not pulling no punches here. Is that I'd like to stand in nearly every ward in the city if I could, and that's to be answered in the future of the success of us and moving forward. But certainly the opportunity to welcome comrades and socialists into our group. Come and help us. Come and take part. Come and campaign with us, and be part of us.
I mean, we have taken a battering. We have to be honest about that in terms of people have left the party. We've lost really good, solid supporters. Right across the board, and people have been made politically homeless. That's the reality of it. But we're hoping that we have a renewed energy in terms of our party going forward, or our group going forward. And that, we can't afford to walk away. And I know people are feeling really sort of demoralised because of the way they've been treated. But we can't walk away and just leave this to what's left of the Labour Party and the Tories to sort out. And so, we hope that we're going to have a renewed confidence, and people are going to see that there is a positive way forward. And we will act as a critical friend, and we want people to be critical friends to us also. And we want to, bring a collective group of like-minded people together who want to represent communities, not just here in Liverpool, but up and down the UK, and as far afield as we can possibly go. Because the reality is, there is a political void at the moment, and that's the reality of life. There is a political void, but also that there's a political landscape that's changing, ever changing. And, I think everybody's astounded with the stance from the Labour Party. I don't think anybody thought in our lifetime we would see a stance like this. And I think people are really quite shocked by it and still reeling from the repercussions and ramifications of it. But there is a way forward, and we have to be very bold and brave, and we have to try and, resolve the issues going forward and make sure that our constituents are looked after, supported through some of it. And we are going to have some heinous, really, really heinous times ahead of us, not just in terms of food and poverty, cost of living. The heating bills are going through the roof, pardon the pun, they literally are. And when we've got elders sitting there freezing, frightened to put the heating on, and mothers with young families whose children are sitting there with free jumpers on, come on, we've got to fight. We're fighting for hearts and minds here, and we've got to continue that fight.
Yes. It's now 2-0, by the way. Sorry, Demo. Go on, Alan.
I think the other point is that the people who do stand have got to have roots in the community. Any time when socialists try to parachute into somewhere where they don't have a track record, they get the pitiful token votes, and they're all the same, 180, 200. To stand any chance against, Liberal Democrat machines, Labour Party machines, any party machine, you've got to have a proven track record. You've got to be visible to people inside the community. And that's why we use the word community, because we need people who are going to hold the Labour Party to account, who are going to put forward a message of investment for the city that goes forward. You've got to be part of that community, talking to people every day. It's going to be tough for any of us if we stand again next year. But somebody started from outside without a proven track record, you get demolished electorally. That's the reality. And so it's people who are always there and have been always there, taking up the day-to-day issues. If you're not doing that as a socialist, don't expect to walk through an election.
I mean, I think we also have to be mindful that we've got a much more sophisticated electorate now than ever. We've got people, grassroots people, who are actually active in the communities, been doing amazing work through the pandemic, and have shown how you can really organise as a group of like-minded people. And really, we want to be encouraging people to come forward as well, to consider standing for elections, to stand as candidates, because that's the backbone of the city. Our city is built on a network of people who are all like-minded people, they're all socialists at heart, and they're fighters. They get the job done. And if they can't find the way over it, around it, they'll go under it or through it. And that's the heart and soul of the city. That's what we want to try and capture. We want to bring them people along with us as well.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Liverpool's very strong on that, and I mean, hopefully can set a model that the rest of the country can look at. But I mean, all of this obviously depends on ideally getting re-elected next year, and that depends on the reaction of the local communities to the new group, etc. So obviously it's been announced today. I mean, it's had a reasonable amount of attention from the local media, as far as I can tell. Probably not much wider than that, but I haven't had a chance to have a proper look yet. But what kind of, from a grassroots point of view and media point of view, what sort of response are you getting, or are you expecting
Really positive
in your own seats?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really positive so far. Obviously, we're doing a fair bit of interviews, etc. We're on BBC Politics show on Thursday. We're doing the recording for that. And so, the thing is that the spell has been lifted. We can speak openly and honestly about what we're about. It's been time consuming. Some of us went over as independents, sooner rather than later. Some have joined us, but the reality is now is that we couldn't function within, that the party politics that was going on. We can't afford to be silenced. We have to be able to speak out about the injustices that are taking place. And so I think it's been really positive. And I think we'll go from strength to strength, because you know what? The electorate is sick of all the bickering, they're sick to the back teeth of the personality politics. They want people who are going to put differences aside and focus on the real issue. And the big issues there are our constituents, our residents, fighting all the big issues, not just the poverty and the fuel poverty, the 0-hour contracts, the attack on the trade unions, etc. These are all the things that are going to make a big difference. This is the line that we need to draw in the sand. This is where we need to be bold and brave and speak out about the total injustice, because believe you me, all that legislation that we fought so hard for decades is being eroded in front of our eyes. And we see that with P&O, we see that with the 0-hour contracts, we see that with the women workers who are losing their maternity rights in terms of employment, etc. like that. These are the important issues that we need to fight on.
I think we can't underestimate the electorate either. The residents know from speaking to them that this isn't a left-wing mayor. They know that because of the actions and the behaviour of the mayor. They know that Keir Starmer, just by being involved with the Sun, they know the Labour Party is such a bad party now. So creating an alternative for our residents, I think we've got the timing spot on.
Yeah, well, every political movement has to start somewhere, doesn't it, after all? I noticed there was a comment that came up on the screen a moment ago regarding people changing their voting habits, and they will vote with whoever's wearing that red rosette. But when that red rosette is worn by a man leading the party of the red rosette, and he is writing in that horrible publication, if you can call it that, I think that sends a much more powerful message than a great many conversations, even certainly political decision making. And Labour is, I suppose, I mean, obviously I'm not up in Liverpool, but I get this sense of Labour's letting the city down horribly, and that sentiment's carrying through, and it's showing in the local elections that you're having. So to anybody that's going to stand up to challenge that and say, right, we're going to scrutinise this, and of course scrutiny is a massive part of local politics, which possibly doesn't get as much attention as it could do, because it's not necessarily the most interesting of the politics that you guys might have to deal with. But holding them to account and showing people that that's exactly what you're doing, that's surely a good way to get started, isn't it?
Let's be honest, it was a huge betrayal of the city with what Keir Starmer did. We'll never forgive him for that, and nor should we. But it just shows the contempt that he has for the city. To throw that in our faces after the long endurance of the Hillsborough families, etc. It just shows you that is just so wrong on so many levels. It'll never be forgiven. The city doesn't forget, and it never will forget that. But I think also in terms of somebody's just said about the NHS, I think we've just had a message up from Emma Whitby about the privatisation of the NHS. These are all the big issues. These are the big issues where we need to have that open and honest debate. you know, we've been curtailed. We've been, you know, we haven't been allowed to speak on the big issues openly and thrash them out and, you know, find alternative approaches to, you know, resolve the issues. That hasn't been allowed. No political party, I don't care who you are, you can't have a robust political party if you want to silence people. Debate, discussion about autonomy and openness is integral to any political party. And we're hoping to bring that back.
To follow up on that, take a look at what's happened with two of the motions that we put forward. One of them, myself and Tim Jeeves, put forward what I was talking about, opposition to the health bill. It wasn't a debate at full council. It was pushed onto a select committee. The same happened over the nationalities bill, pushed onto a select committee. I think you had a motion recently over, was it the 0 hours contracts and everything? That was pushed onto a select committee. These are major issues affecting our country. They should be at full council. They shouldn't be pushed onto select committees. There's been too much of an approach that what's dominated full council has been this kind of mission statement-itis, where you get the material for glossy brochures rather than the issues that are going to materially affect our communities. I mean, just think of, to say the NHS, if you said to anybody, the one defining thing that determines the Labour Party is credible was the founding of the NHS in 1948. And then you say that not only that hardly any other councils except Liverpool even voted opposition to the health bill, it hardly got mentioned in any other council, but even in Liverpool, it was pushed onto a select committee. So there's myself and Tim Jeeves talking to a room of, 28 people. And that is just not right. It's got to be in the performative theatre chamber, the heart of Liverpool democracy, which is the council chamber itself. And we want to make sure some of the other issues coming up, I mean, P&O is going to come up at the next council. We've got to make sure that it's not tokenism. I mean, the idea you can get away with throwing 800 people arbitrarily out of work, manacling people and marching them off a ship. I mean, come on. And this is more related to an autocracy or a dictatorship than to a parliamentary democracy. We've got to make sure that there's a fiery response to this.
Well, I just hope that the motion I've put forward regarding P&O and the sacking of 800 workers and the way it was done in such a horrendous way, I just hope that they don't try to send that to a select committee. Because you know what? They need to be in full council and they need cross-party support. And anybody who wants to kick these into the long grass by sending to a select committee, it just shows you where they stand. They want to cover everything up. They don't want anything to be discussed or debated. And for me, that's not a democratic process. No. You know, it needs to be open and transparent and it needs to be scrutinised. And the people who elect members in this city need to have the opportunity to do that. And the only way they're going to have the opportunity is by open and honest and frank debate within that council.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the city's press tends to lean, well, what they call centrist. And as I mentioned before, they've been acting as apologists for the actions of the mayor of the council and so on. Are you expecting any kind of support from them, or at least a fair crack of the whip? If not, what's your plan for getting your communications out to people so they still get to hear what's going on?
I mean, I'd say I think there's been a reasonably fair press for us over the last few days. I think part of it is that we put in a very clear and open message. I think if you do that, even with a skewed media system like we've got in this country because of its ownership, you can have an impact in getting your message across. And you've got to try and be as effective as possible. Reach out to people, be positive, and we all know the obstacles to that. But I think over the last 2 or 3 days, our message has got across in Merseyside. So I'm reasonably optimistic.
I think in terms of community-wise, we, as independents, single independents, we weren't allowed to be on select committees. But now that we have formed a group, we will be able to scrutinise a hell of a lot more. We will be able to have our input. We will be able to question the members according to what our residents think. So I do think we are going to have much more of an influence by being a group, and I think the newspapers will have to listen.
I think one example of that is Electoral and the airport expansion, because I mean, at one time you wouldn't have dreamed that would be picked up as an issue that the Labour Party would actually cohere around. But the Electoral campaign doggedly kept going. A number of us started to push on it, and actually the position the council took is very, very promising. So I think sometimes it's gears moving gears, cogs turning cogs, and our community groups and the campaigners out there are absolutely vital. They've got to hold us to account. There's no point us as 8 representatives thinking we're going to be any better than anybody else. It's the relationship you have with community and with the trade unions and with rank and file activists in campaigns that really makes the difference. It's got to be a different sort of representation.
A lot of the stuff that is involved in getting messages out to people, leafleting, advertising, whatever else, all costs money. And now as an independent group, you haven't got a party machine behind you, even if Labour was, bankrupt thanks to Keir Starmer, or very near to it. What's your plan for funding what you need to do, and how can people who are watching help if they are so inclined?
I think we're going to do a collective crowdfunder for all independents. I mean, I did jump the gun and create my own one, which wasn't the best thing to do. But I am learning. But yeah, we will set up a joint crowdfunder for people to donate to.
And this is the collective. This is what the Labour Party originally was built on. Collective, like-minded people who found a way financially, even in the hardest of times. And and we need to go back to our roots. We really do, and we need that buy-in from people. We want them to be involved. We want them to be part of the journey. We want them to hold us to account, and we want them to support us. And we know it's difficult times, but even if everybody put £1 in, we'd be able to do what we need to do in terms of the leafleting and stuff like that. And the other thing is, let's not underestimate word of mouth. That's the language of this city. Everything has been built in the city on word of mouth. Before we had campaign rags and stuff like that and magazines, don't underestimate the power of word of mouth about the way communities talk to each other and how they share information. There's no better form of communication than that.
Alan, you got anything to add on that one?
Do you know what? I think the one that always hits me is Harold Macmillan saying events. I mean, the one thing that we can be sure is that the way we see things panning out will not be how they pan out. So many things are going to affect the way people think and vote. And I mean, Anna mentioned the cost of living crisis. It's not even started yet. People have had the deep intake of breath. But I mean, there are people in this city and elsewhere across Britain who won't know how to put food on the table. That's the reality. And it turns everything on its head. In terms of the way people vote, it's incredibly difficult to achieve the brand recognition of Labour, Lib Dem, Tories, even though we don't have Tories in Liverpool. I mean, we've got to achieve brand recognition in a very short period of time. There is also a case that national politics has some impact. So Keir Starmer has done nothing whatsoever positive, and yet Boris Johnson's explosion of his own fundament has actually given him a gift. I suspect Keir Starmer can still manage to tear, defeat out of the jaws of victory, such as his talent. However, we're in the middle of all that mix, do you know what? I find that exciting. Now, Warbrick shows the dangers, this massive swing. The Lib Dems have been invisible in that ward for 15 years. They had the worst set of councillors 15 years ago in the whole city. I won't go in the details, but they're appalling. It was the worst council in Britain the last time the Lib Dems were in, according to the Audit Commission. They implemented austerity. And despite all of that, Labour took a hammering in Warbrick over the green bins charge. And I think that reflects something about the perception of lack of transparency, possible corruption, distance from the people around the Labour group. Also is impacted by a distrust of Keir Starmer. And it also shows the creaking nature of the coalition that Labour builds. There's a huge number of people, when we do door knocking, who are still very attached to Jeremy Corbyn in the city. And they feel he has been utterly betrayed, and their hopes were utterly betrayed. That makes a very, very complex mix into which we're stepping. And all we can say is we can't give an analysis that will meet every element of that. But we can test it by working down hard in our community, trying to put forward very clear, transformative policies and hold the current Labour Party to account. Hopefully out of all of that will come a positive vision for the future and, you know, a reasonable chance of success wherever people do stand.
I think, Steve, for me, being in the south of Liverpool again, quite a vulnerable place, especially for the Labour Party at the minute. We've got, I think residents understand that there's a lot of Labour councillors here that have become complacent and lazy just because they think they're going to get elected again. They think Labour will be the traditional vote that everyone will always vote on. And there's been a massive change over the last couple of years. And Labour isn't the party of the people anymore. And people are beginning to recognise that.
Yeah, you only have to look at those front benches and look at them and think which ones are working class, which ones have come from a trade, which ones are like me. And you look at all these faces, your Starmers and your Streetings and whoever else, and there's nothing in those faces that's familiar to me. I can't remember who it was that said it now. It said that we have more in common with the Jamaican brookie than we do with any of these faces that we see in front of us. And it's true. Labour's connection, or the Parliamentary Labour Party's connection with the ordinary working class folk of this country is deteriorating fast. And you know, listening to the conversations we've had with you guys tonight and the stories you've told, it's if it's happening in Liverpool, which is supposedly the reddest, most staunchest Labour city of them all, then it can happen anywhere. And Labour really is on a collision course with utter destruction if it doesn't do something to differentiate itself now from the Conservatives, because right now I'm not seeing it.
And Keir Starmer's going the opposite way. He's trying to make himself more like the Conservatives. And I agree with Boris as basically being his refrain since he got in, which is horrific when you consider the things that have been going on. Here's a thought. I mean, would the Liverpool community independents be interested in a regular spot on Socialist Telly and some guest columns on Squawk Box as a way of getting the word out? Because, you know, from my point of view, certainly be welcome. And I doubt there would be anybody who's involved in Socialist Telly that would begrudge that airtime as a means of getting the word out and having stuff at least out there on the record that people can be referred to if they're asking questions about stuff. Because I think that would be, you know, that would, from my point of view, would be must-watch stuff. And, you know, so if that's of interest and it wouldn't cost you anything, then, you know, you'd be certainly welcome to have a go at that. And it'll be one way to get the word out without incurring a charge.
There's already a couple of issues for that. And one of them is the mayoralty, because, I mean, the consultation is not as good. Most people did want a referendum. Most people do want rid of the mayor. Any turnaround on that would be catastrophic. And the other one is the commissioners, because, I mean, there's been rumblings for a while now, but I mean, real questions have to be asked now, is exactly what the commissioners for. They were sent in to try and examine 3 sections of the council. And suddenly there's mission creep, where they start to comment on the overall direction of the council. They're given a public welcome at the city council, when the people of Liverpool, I don't think, felt like that at all. What we need is to know exactly what happened. About a year now, who's responsible, who should be brought to account. We actually need answers after a year. They're being paid enough, and they're even taking on research staff
Yeah.
I mean, come on, they were supposed to be the experts to come and sort things out, and they need more experts. I think Anna was the first to bring that up. Honest to God, we need to see something out of this. And what we don't need to see out of it is turning the searchlight on rank and file Labour Party members who actually have ideas very much like this. That's the reality.
I mean, for me, I think it was a breach of contract. They came to the city and agreed to do that piece of work for a set price. And then within a couple of months, they said, well, actually, we think we deserve 50% more. Not only do we deserve 50% increase in our salary, but we also deserve the accommodation and, obviously the expenses, the travel expenses. And, it's just gone beyond ridiculous. I mean, and then, they were also saying that they deserved that salary because they were experts in their field. But at the same time, they were recruiting support officers to do the policy work. But, I was like, this is just growing and growing, and it's unmanageable. And it's almost as though nobody's keeping check of it. They come with a specific remit. Okay, you can argue whether we wanted them or not, but they had a specific remit. As far as I'm concerned, they need to focus on that remit, get that job done in a timely fashion, with the most cost-effective way, practice some of their own principles in terms of best value, and then get out of the city as quickly as they came in. Give us a report. As far as I'm concerned, they're not scrutinised. They don't do a report back to elected members. Nobody actually knows what they're doing. I challenged it and sent it to governance to see whether we could do some scrutiny on it. I've been told that no, we can't do it because it's not within our gift to do that, because they run from London, from Whitehall, and that they're the people that actually have a say about what they do and don't do. Come on,
yes, I mean you expect that kind of stuff from the Tories, but I mean this consultation's gone out in the last week or so for this mayoral thing, for example, which was promised that we'd have a full referendum on whether we kept a mayor's position, and I think the current mayor, kind of actually campaigned for that to happen and against the mayoral position in the first place.
She actually said that she wanted to sack herself.
Yes,
they were her words. She's
now we're getting a consultation where people get to put their opinion somewhere, but nobody's actually going to release figures about who's said what and how many want a mayor, how many don't, etc.
Well, it's not a legal process though.
Yeah, well, you used to expect lack of transparency from the Tories, but you want to be able to expect better than that from the Labour Party, and at the moment you can't.
I don't think people realise there's a consultation, but actually it's going to be decided by a vote of councillors, a vote of full council. And we'll be looking at every single councillor saying, if you said the mayoralty is going to go, you have got to vote for it to go and to replace it with another model. I mean, you can't do U-turns like that and be credible. You really, really can't.
They just seem to be assuming that the Labour voting habit in Liverpool is so entrenched that they can get away with anything, and people are still going to tick that box. So where's the tipping point come, I guess, is the question. So I mean, we were going to do this at the beginning of the programme, but we've got quite far into it now. We've got 6 minutes left. Let's talk about what your kind of positive policies and key issues are then that you want to achieve. And how will they appeal to the local people in terms of ticking the box for LCI when it comes to it?
I just want to point out that what we said earlier on was, let's be transformative. Let's be transformative in the policies that we try to put through. We're going to go out into by-elections, into elections. Well, what are you going to do for us? What is it going to do? Well, we're certainly going to be putting policies through to stave off these cuts. The alternative level and up paper that we said earlier on had an achievement to do that, and not only achievement to do that, but to be transformative in terms of let's finally give something back to the people. The people of this city are politically deteriorated. They have got nothing left in their cylinder. They've been battered with the crisis, the pandemic, with the recession. They've been battered from pillar to post. They had the opportunity of the Labour Party for them to protect them, and they've kicked them right in the teeth. What we want to do is give that back to the people of the city. Let's give that promise that in that alternative paper, there is finances there that we can build the new sports centres. we can reintroduce the social housing programme that was in the that was about to be rolled out. Oh my God, how much do we need social housing in this city? We're so desperate for social housing. Let's reintroduce that. Let's get the sports centres built. We can afford to do it. We've got the lowest repayment in public borrowing at the moment. Let's go and do it. Why not? Why can't we do it? Let's give something back to the people of the city. And that's what we'll be fighting for.
And we also need to redefine the term affordable housing as well.
Yeah, well, affordable's a big con, isn't it? So, Anna, we're on the last 4 minutes. You were outnumbered tonight and struggling along the way. Doing very well, but I'm gonna give you the last couple of minutes on the program to run us out, and then we'll finish. And thank you everybody.
Yeah, we need
for
to look
taking
at
part.
economic equality. I mean, we need to be looking at class issues. We need to be looking at secure work, employment for people going forward, and we need to be building on some of the strengths of the city. We've got the free port there. That's going to be a big issue. During the pandemic, the majority of ships decided that was their port of choice to come to Liverpool. There's potential there to create a lot of employment, but at the moment it's just fixed-term contracts in terms of employment. We can't allow that to go on. We need a longer, consideration in terms of the commitment to employment within the free port. Everyone's jostling for positions in terms of the free port because, let's be honest, it's going to be, financially rewarding for those that can get their foot in the door. We've even got businesses who are actually relocating so that they're within the free port area. And so, we need to make sure that we focus on employment, make sure that we keep employment local in the city as well. We need to be fighting against the things around fixed-term contracts, 0-hour contracts, insecure working. And we need to be making sure that we've got our rights in terms of employment legislation. P&O ferries, keep going back to that. That was the test. That was the test, and they tested this city. They picked the wrong people to run a test like that. I believe you and me. We didn't allow them to get away with that. We saw there in terms of the director from P&O, and when he was held in front of parliamentary committee, and he basically said that he willingly did what he did, knowing what he was doing. My God, look at the front of that person to do that. Do they really think we're stupid? If we'd allowed them to get away with that, that would have been the test for the way things were going to go in terms of all of the employment legislation that we fought so hard for. So we've got lots of things there to focus on. We've got to renew confidence in elected members. It's become a joke in terms of the representation. The amounts of lies that we're seeing, from political posts, not just at a national level, at a local level. Reneging on deals, people are abdicating the responsibility as elected members that are allowing community members to start doling out, food and support for our most needy and most vulnerable people in the city. That is not the role of community members. We've got a fantastic not-for-profit community here in Liverpool and nationally, but that's not their role. That's the role of elected members in government to bail out people who are dealing, with considerable hardship. And so there's some of the issues that we need to bring back to the table and start having the big discussions about.
Thank you ever so much for that, everybody. We're at the end of our hour. That's flown through. We are up and running every week on Socialist Telly. Hopefully we'll have some new programming coming soon with the LCI. Speaking at the people of Liverpool and around the country. It could become kind of the resistance station for the rest of the UK as well. Thank you everybody who's watched. If you are watching this on catch up, thank you for that as well. Do share and make sure people are aware of what's going on. Come on the Reds. There's still 2-0 up at half time, I gather, and I'm going to let you get off. And those who are so inclined can watch the second half. But solidarity, good luck, and thank you for bringing a little ray of light and a little bit of hope. Pauline's just asking, are you giving yourselves a name yet? It's Liverpool Community Independence, Pauline, or LCI. So thank you very much, everybody. We will see you around on Socialist Telly in the course of the next few days, no doubt. Take care and enjoy the rest of your week.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.